a lot of, well, us, including the future of our field, will hopefully not get desk rejected and at some point be invited to actually resubmit their manuscript. So this is the notorious R&R process. So we'd love to get your thoughts on some of the issues that you may encounter then. So the first question that we have for you is, if you have reviewers which are conflicting, as editors, what do you do? So in your role as editors, how do you deal with someone who says, who is very positive and someone who's very negative, for instance?
Yeah, conflicting reviewers or reviewers that differ in their final evaluation of the manuscript always require an editor to have a careful look at those review reports. And what I do is check the quality of the reviewers. Sometimes it is very short and not justified, and then I feel free to disregard those comments or nuance those comments in my overall evaluation to the authors. In general, I think it's very good as editors to give authors the advice to carefully consider the different reviews and see what best fits their research and their purposes with the manuscript, and then decide what to implement and offer a clear justification of what they have done and what they have revised to the manuscript in their letter to the editor. That's very important. So the letter to the editor, in particular with these varying reviews, is very important. Sometimes it's even as lengthy as the article itself, to explain what you did, why you did it, and related to that, really seriously engage with each reviewer. That's very important, so that they see that you took their comments seriously, that you thought about it, and that you have a very concrete response to them.
Well, I agree with the importance of the letter to the editor and reviewers, which indeed tends to be very detailed. I've seen letters that were easily 50 pages in and of themselves. So that also makes it hard to read, right? But I agree with that. I think I would probably I would probably add a comment that if you receive an R&R, a revise and resubmit or major revision, depending on the journal, and the reviews are conflicting, the fact that you received an R&R or a major revision, it means that the editor sees merit in the paper and believes that you can improve the manuscript based on the reviewer comments. So it's even if it might seem daunting, it's still very worthwhile to give it an effort. And I think it's also very valuable. And I know that this sometimes goes a little bit against the mainstream, but don't be afraid to, in a very polite manner, to sometimes also push back to specific comments of reviewers that you don't agree with. I dared not do this as a PhD student, and it was more senior people who actually told me, you don't have to just accept everything. And I mean, if there's good arguments, push back and in a polite manner explain what you did and why. So don't always think that you need to have a solution to every comment raised by the reviewer. Sometimes it's also about explaining yourself, pushing back a bit, providing arguments, and that can still get you the final accept.
If I may add to that as well, so it could be also that there's more than one round of revisions. So if you get the Holy Grail, which is an R&R or major revisions, indeed, that does not mean that the next one will be an accept or a minor revisions. I've had quite a few articles that I wrote that had to go through 3 or even 4 rounds of revisions. And it's quite common to hear, and I'm sure that we all have colleagues here who would tell us about their stories of having 10 rounds of revisions or having 10 years to get a paper eventually published, and that paper being ultimately the most important ones that they ever publish. So yeah, it's important to take the reviewers' comments into considerations, and what I think we all do here as editors as well is to try to nudge the authors in the right direction. If there are some comments that seem more striking than others, then in our decision letter, we can add a note to the authors stating to pay particular attention to these particular comments. It could be also that in the case where we get 2 reviewers and one is a poor quality reject that is just like 3 or 4 lines saying, I don't like this paper without further justification, and the other being a better quality and qualified decision that is like major revisions on or whatnot, then we invite a 3rd reviewer in the mix. This is not a situation that we as editors, and I mean, I don't want to speak for everyone, but that I at least personally like, because A, it slows the process down, and B, it's adding someone like later in the mix for someone who might not know about the history of a paper, if it's a paper that has been submitted beforehand, that has gone through a series of revisions. But in some extreme scenarios, that's something that we feel we have to do, because we as editors might not feel like we have all the information needed from reviewers to make an informed decision. So these are scenarios that sometimes happen behind the scenes. One of the advice that I would give to authors who have the impression that it takes a little bit too much time to get an update on their manuscript, it's just to contact the editors through the rounds of revisions, saying, well, I'd like just to have like a quick update, and maybe the editors will be able to provide some information on the matter.
Conflicting reviews is, well, it happens. I mean, we're scientists, we're not supposed to agree, apparently. We always have some sort of disagreement. And can you maybe provide practical tips for PhD students or peers, more senior people, and how do you deal with these conflicting reviews?
Well, I think it has already been said by Bert and Celesta also. First of all, it's important to substantiate your argument. And of course, if reviewers have conflicting reviews and also conflicting views on a particular issue in your article, then you have to make a decision. So you cannot keep everyone satisfied. So you have to take a side, and it should be your own side, because it's your paper and you should remain the owner of your paper. And then of course it's about the substantiation of your argument. And what can be helpful is outlining the disagreement. So state in your response letter that the reviewers are in disagreement on a specific issue in your paper, and then explain where this disagreement may come from, and then further explain how you navigate this disagreement and how you have solved this in your article. So most of the time, a response letter is just listing the responses to every, remark that has been made by the different reviewers, but sometimes it can be good to point out issues between reviewers. So then you have to compose your response letter a little bit different, but it can be very helpful just to point it out that there is disagreement.
I fully agree with Sandra. We seem to be seeing eye to eye a lot, which is normal, right? Because we do all have that experience. I would probably, so public administration review always has 3 reviewers, right? So the likelihood of disagreement with at least one is quite big. As an author, I think that the most important point is, well, there are 2 points. I think, first of all, again, what we're seeing is text. Sometimes it's a shame that you cannot go into a conversation with reviewers, because what you're seeing is an assessment text that someone did voluntarily, who is very busy, and they gave their honest assessment of a paper. And sometimes that can sound very harsh and very negative, and perhaps sometimes it is, but not always. I have had personally reviewers flip, who were very positive in the first round, very negative in the second, and vice versa. So this can happen. And I think what Sandra said about pointing out the disagreements, again, in a very friendly manner, I think it's perfectly valid. Talking to perhaps a bit more senior scholars with some more experience could also be helpful, just to shape your arguments, have them read your reviewer letter and ask, is this friendly enough? Is it constructive enough, while still pushing back? And then thirdly, what I said about and I think I like what Sandra mentions here as well, it's your paper. So in the end, you should be satisfied with the end product you receive. And if you're implementing comments that make your paper fuzzy or that present opposing argument and so forth, well, you don't want that. So you can indeed push back, and I think you ought to push back.